Hey guys, it's Brendan here. I find that oftentimes I'm a much better speaker and communicator, presenter than I am in the written word. As you all know, Facebook is quite difficult and challenging to respond thoughtfully in a comment section because you can't hear inflections and tone of voice. And oftentimes in the comment section, especially on ANF, I'm responding to 3 or 4 different people who hold 3 or 4 different views about the same thing that they actually believe in. And so I want to address one specific question, and I promised you I would. And so this is on behalf or for, I'm screwing up words, Brittany and Robert specifically. I want to thank Brittany Mead, I believe is how you pronounce your last name, because when you explain the concept of corporal autonomy, and I kept mistakenly calling it corporate autonomy, it's corporal autonomy, I realize, but when you explained the concept of corporal autonomy, that was really the first time somebody explained that pro-choice concept in a way that made sense to me, that I can rationalize, think about, and honestly understand. And so I definitely want to thank you for taking the time and the patience to explain that. And so I want to kind of regurgitate that idea first back to you to make sure that you and Robert as well know that I really do understand the concept that you were putting forth. And so with corporal autonomy, you use the example of the kidney transplant. Whether the person is living or dead, if for instance, I have a son. I've got 2 sons, actually. If my son needed a kidney to live, okay, of course, I would give my son the kidney. However, it would be an act of tyranny for the government to step in, forcibly take me into surgery, to harvest my organs, to give to somebody else in order for them to live without my consent, even if it's my own child. And that concept really helped me to understand why it is that certain pro-choice people say things like, I would never have an abortion, but I'm not opposed to other people getting them. And that's something that really baffled me for a really long time. But then understanding the concept of corporal autonomy, especially when it comes to organ transplants, even with your own children, it's another way of saying, I would of course give my own child an organ of mine. But I would not want to live in a state where the government can come in and harvest that from me without my permission. And so let's take a pause right here, or a brief pause, for you to comment that, yes, okay, you understand the concept of corporal autonomy. It's my body, and whether it's the life of another person or not is regardless of the fact that I have a right to control what comes and goes out of my body, even if it means somebody else lives or dies. So I went home yesterday, lit the barbecue after I was done talking for quite a bit, and talked with my wife and watched my kids play, and I really thought about that concept. And I came to see that while it's a decent argument, it's flawed. Because the concept of body organ transplants against my will versus an abortion are not quite apples and apples. It's a bit apples and oranges, and it might be a stretch to say apples and oranges, but it's definitely oranges and lemons, related but distinct enough to not be the same. Because if I were to use an equal equation to that concept of organ transplant and a child, what I would have to say is, instead of a child is dying and needs my organ, I would have to say, I did an action. I did a thing. I did something. And through my action, the child became and entered into a symbiotic relationship with me. Now, this is obviously medically a problem. So then I go to the doctor. And the doctor says, well, you've got 2 options. The first option is this. In about 10 months, the symbiotic relationship between you and your son is going to cease, most likely with both of you living the rest of your lives just fine. There might be complications, but literally billions of people do this and they survive. You could just wait. In about 10 months, you'll either detach naturally or we can go in surgically and remove your son from your body. But if that's not tenable to you, what we can do is we can put your son to death through lethal injection. And then once he has died, we can remove him from your body so that you are free from him. Now that has more in common with somebody that just needs a kidney transplant. Because in the case of the transplant, somebody is on the path to death and you are deciding to not act. And by your inaction, they are going to die. And in the case also legally, it would be wrong for the government to violently and forcibly do something to your body in order for someone else to live. Whereas with an abortion instance, you are, the other life form is going to live of natural causes, and by natural causes will be detached from you. And so therefore the abortion is an act to end a life and to remove a life. And from the legal standpoint, the government is preventing you from acting positively against something else that's living. It's a different matter. You know, we hear pro-choice women say, it's my body. Yes, it is your body, but it's not just your body. There is another body involved. So let me restate the difference and why this is important. I read somewhere in the comment section that somebody said that they became pro-choice because of the corporal autonomy argument, because of the kidney transplant argument, but it's not the same. With the kidney transplant, somebody is dying for their own reasons, for whatever have happened, and you have had zero involvement or responsibility, and saving their life would make you would have to make a positive action. You would actually have to physically do something to save their life, and they're not attached to you or part of you. But with an abortion, it's much more like the symbiotic relationship that has occurred because of your action. And for the sake of argument, we won't address the rape issue, okay? So some people would like to argue about that, even on the pro-life side. And so for the sake of argument, I'm going to grant that one over to you and just say, okay, for sake of argument, let's not talk about when it's forced. But because of your action, somebody's entered into a symbiotic relationship with you. And unlike the kidney person, the symbiotic relationship, they will live and they will separate themselves from you, and they are already alive. Corporate autonomy with the kidney transplant patient, you don't do anything, they die anyways. Corporate autonomy with abortion, you don't do anything and they live and they leave you. And so corporal autonomy isn't the center of the abortion debate. Personhood is. And when does a person receive the right to live? And I'm not saying that just because somebody has the right to live means that their rights always supersede your right, especially when it comes to your right to live. But if my action caused my child to enter into a symbiotic relationship with me, that through the course of time will separate from me and both of us more than likely will live, then ethically, his right to live is more important than my right to not be attached or to support him, unless there is just cause to remove him. And as the U.S. Constitution puts it in so many words, nobody should have their right to live taken from them without just cause or due process. Now, none of this solves the abortion debate, because the abortion debate doesn't center on corporal autonomy, it centers on personhood. When does the other body that's being involved become a human body? But whether you draw the line at 37 weeks or 22 weeks or 12 weeks, if it isn't a person, then it doesn't matter. They don't have rights. And of course, the big problem I have with that is where that line is drawn. And why is that line drawn? Because nobody seems to be in agreement on it. And to be honest, it's arbitrary. It's relative. It's not scientific. People are just simply stating, I believe at birth. I believe at viability. I believe after the first trimester. But what I know is that my children, two of them, one's 5 and one's 2, they came into existence not 5 and 2 years ago, but they came into existence when my sperm met their mother's egg, and when half of my DNA merged with half of her DNA to create a new DNA sequence, a new human being, which started at conception. At conception, a new life was created. A new being, at the very least, a new being, A new life form was created. Therefore, the heart of the argument for pro-life is that that life form, that human being, is entitled to life and shouldn't have their basic human right to live removed from them without just cause or due process. Now, to be fair, even in the pro-life circles, there are different definitions about what constitutes just cause and what kind of due process should there be. But the one thing that unifies us is that there needs to be just cause. I hope my argument there made sense, particularly in terms of the rejection of the corporal autonomy bit. And so I look forward to your comments. I thank you for everyone that's watching. For those of you who disagree with me, but have been patient enough to listen, have been patient enough to consider, and have been patient enough to respond, I hope that you see that I am willing to do the same. Thanks for your time.